everyone. Happy Independence Day, and welcome to our special event today where we will be discussing with our great friend, Pharmacist Ben Fuchs, the triangle of disease. And this is a presentation that was inspired by our good friend and mentor, Dr. Joel Wallach, and we will get into that. But first, let me introduce you to a gentleman who is a nutritional pharmacist for over 30 years, has been dedicating his life to teaching people that they can take their power back and control their own health outcomes by understanding a couple of simple principles. And he's going to go into detail about that today. And I'm going to bring him on the screen. Pharmacist Ben Fuchs, how are you today? Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence Day to you, and thank you for all the hard work you've done, man. This is incredible. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. You and I both been wanting to do this for a long time, and thank you for motivating. I appreciate it. I'm trying to see this. Did you have the screen up? You want to pop it up here? You want to get going?
I'm gonna pop it up in a second. What you always talk about Dr. Wallach's story, where he says the reason he called it
American
American
longevity.
longevity.
Yeah. So before it was longevity, before we were longevity, we were American longevity. And one time I asked Dr. Wallach, why did you name the company American Longevity? And he said to me, because it represented his two favorite ideas. One was America. And on this 4th of July, I can't think of anything more appropriate than to talk about God Bless America, our 250th birthday. He said, America represents doing things by yourself. No kings, right? You don't need authorities. You can take care of your own business. You can pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. And America gives people the opportunity to do their own thing, to be their own authorities. And when it comes to being your own authority, what is more important to us than our health? And that represents the second word, longevity, which was Dr. Wallach's second favorite idea, and that is health and nutrition. So American Longevity, the initial name of the company before it was longevity, was about taking care of your own health. We've got a medical model today that says, no, you can't do it yourself, that your body is inevitably flawed, and whatever your genetics are is going to determine how your health or how your longevity or how your life shows up. We have a completely 180-degree different take. We say that we can take care of our own health, and that's what American Longevity was about. That's what longevity is about, and that's what we're all about. And that's probably what all the people on this who are listening on this call are about as well.
Absolutely, Pharmacist Ben. And I'm going to just share our presentation. You have a concept that you call the triangle of disease.
Yes. The triangle of disease represents the 3 points of bodily breakdown that underlie all health challenges. I noticed this many years ago, probably about 20 years ago, that everybody who came to me with health challenges had 3 basic breakdowns underneath their diagnoses. Now, as you know, and we'll talk about here in a moment, there are over 50,000 different medical diagnoses, but they all have the same kind of breakdowns underneath. And this is really important to understand because when it comes to health, it can get really complicated. The human body is incredibly complex, and healing itself doesn't necessarily have to be that complex because healing and health and wellness really depend on just a few basic biological principles. You've got in the body, you've got thousands of different biological pathways. You got hormones, you've got enzymes, you got nerves, you got immune signals, microbiome chemistry, blood sugar regulation, mitochondria, inflammation, detoxification, circulation, hydration. If a person tries to understand and fix everything all at once, you're going to go crazy. Simplification allows us to ask, what are the main forces driving the problems that are obvious? What I noticed is that there's always 3 basic bodily breakdowns underneath our disease processes. And if you try to work on the disease process or the manifestations of the disease without working on these 3 points, which I call the triangle of disease, it's not going to work. And that accounts largely for the fact that we have more doctors per capita and more drugs and more expensive healthcare, more hospitals and more protocols than any other culture in the history of mankind. And we're the sickest and we're the fattest, and our longevity is pretty much stagnant. I was just reading today how diabetes is expected to affect 50% of North Americans by the year 2035. What the heck is going on? And we've got all of these metabolic protocols and organizations and wisdom and know-how. The problem is that we're not focusing on the fundamental breakdowns that underlie all health challenges, which is what I call the triangle of disease. So the talk today is basically called the triangle of disease, right? You can go to the next slide. If you walk into a hospital today, you're going to be stepping into a mainstream institution that's built on an illusion of complexity. The mainstream medical model, which is exemplified by the ICD codebook, the International Code of Diagnoses, I believe it stands for, a codebook that has over 55,000 different diseases and symptoms and syndromes. How could 55,000 things go wrong in the body? You have a skin issue, you go to the dermatologist. You got a heart issue, you go to the cardiologist. You got brain fog, you go to a neurologist. You got an immune problem, you go to an immunologist. You got a a digestive problem, you go to a GI specialist. A female health problem, you go to OBGYN, and on and on and on. We've chopped the human body up into isolated parts, and we've engineered this medical system, this pharmacomedical system that manages the symptoms of every single part, of every single one of these parts. But what we're doing is we're managing the fruit, not the root. Next slide. 30 years ago, Dr. Wallach, brilliant, visionary, veterinarian and naturopathic physician, he shocked the world with a cassette tape he called "Dead Doctors Don't Lie," and he proved through his research that via tens of thousands of different autopsies on both animals and humans, he showed that virtually every human being that dies of natural causes dies of nutritional deficiency diseases. In other words, we're not sick, we're not dying because we have a pharmaceutical deficiency, because we have a genetic malady, because we're inevitably doomed, because our bodies are flawed. We're sick because our cells are literally starving to death. And in fact, at the point of death, we die because cells are not getting nutriated appropriately. The nutritional status of the cells and the nutritional status of the tissues and the organs is fundamental to our wellness. And that was Dr. Wallach's premise when he came up with the Dead Doctors Don't Lie tape 30 years ago. And that's what we talk about here today. Next slide. So you got 55,000 different diseases, but you know what? All of those diseases can be collapsed into one single problem. I call it dirty blood. So first of all, we got to talk about the cell. The nexus of life in the body is not the organ and it's not the tissue. It is the cell. And we want to start to understand this incredible creature called the cell. You know, when most people think of the cell, they think of a circle on the blackboard in high school biology, right? You have a circle and you got a few things inside of it, and we call that the cell. That's not what a cell is. That is an incredibly simplistic notion or description of what is a mind-bogglingly, staggeringly complex system. A cell is about 1/100th the size of a head of a pin, a typical cell, right? That means you fit about 100 typical cells on the head of a pin. They vary in size, but let's just say around that size. If you were to look at a cell, you couldn't see it because it's invisible. It's so tiny. But within that tiny space, you have got literally millions upon millions of working parts. And those working parts are molecules. To give you a sense of what a molecule is, a glass of water is made up of water molecules. We call them H2O molecules. In a glass of water, you have a septillion water molecules. Not a billion, not a trillion, not a quadrillion, not a centillion, not a sestillion. I don't even know what the numbers are. You got a septillion. You have more water molecules in a glass of water than you have stars in the known universe. That's how tiny a molecule is. Yet within a cell, you've got millions of these molecules. And these molecules are constantly shape-shifting. these molecules are information carriers. These molecules are constantly being broken down and built up again. These molecules are informing the cell and other cells that are adjacent and even non-adjacent to the cell what's going on, and nobody has to think about it. In the human body, you've got 100 trillion of these cells. So the complexity of a cell and the macro cellular nature of the body, it's not even possible to comprehend or even imagine. Yet this is where disease begins, at the level of the cell, but we don't hear about that ever. Why is it that we never hear that the nexus of health and wellness is the cell? Well, it's because the medical model can't really do anything about a cell. The medical model can excise a cell, remove the cell. The medical model can poison a cell with drugs. The medical model can ablate the cell or radiate the cell or electrocute the cell, but the medical model is not capable. The pharmacomedical model, our way of taking care of the body, is not capable of addressing the needs of a cell. But that doesn't really matter, because a cell doesn't need a lot of stuff, as we'll talk about here in a moment. A cell needs food, it needs oxygen, and needs a clean place to do its work. But here's where it becomes really important, and here's where it becomes relevant. See, the cell, as amazing as it is, it's not really relevant. It's hard to kind of picture it. It's kind of hard to relate to the cell. But while all disease is cell disease, I mean, all disease is cell disease. There's no such thing as prostate cancer. There's prostate cell cancer. Diabetes is a pancreatic cell issue. Breast cancer is a breast cell issue. Immune problems are immune cell issues. Well, all disease is cell disease. All cell disease is preceded by one phenomena that I call dirty blood. Dirty blood. Now, that's kind of a graphic, term that I use to kind of get people to be able to imagine what that is. But if you're a doctor, you don't call it dirty blood. You call it hypercoagulable blood or hyperviscous blood. This is blood that has a tendency to clot. Now, or to get thick, if not clot. Now, here's what becomes really interesting. When we think about the blood, most of us, we think about this red fluid that's floating around in the body, right? Or that's flowing through the body. And by the way, there's 50,000 miles of blood vessels in the body that the blood is flowing through. Can you imagine this? 50,000 miles of blood vessels. Holy cow. And the blood is constantly flowing through these blood vessels. And this is how cells get fed. This is how cells get oxygenated. And this is how cells get detoxified through the blood. So all disease is cell disease, but all cell disease is preceded by some kind of defect in the blood's movement. The reason why we find this hard to understand is because we think of the blood as some kind of red fluid, but it's not. The blood is a very complex system. The blood has multiple specifications that have to be held just so. The blood has to have just the right temperature. It has just the right pH or acid level. It has to have just the right amount of oxygen and other gases. It has to have just the right amount of particles and just the right amount of cells, just the right amount of plasma. And everything has to be kept within very, very tight specifications. Unfortunately, in our culture today, our blood accumulates toxicity. And where do you suppose it accumulates that toxicity from? It accumulates that toxicity from the digestive tract. In fact, there's really only two ways that the blood can accumulate toxicity. We talk about the digestive tract mostly, but injections can also contaminate the blood. When the blood becomes contaminated via injection or via toxins from the intestine, and we'll talk about that here in a moment, how that occurs, it becomes inflamed. See, the blood is a tissue. And like any tissue, it can become inflamed. When the blood becomes inflamed, it gets sticky and sludgy. And think about it. If the blood were not to become sticky and sludgy and inflamed when toxicity entered into it, the cells would be more likely to be recipients of the toxicity. So this clotting or viscosity that follows toxicity is a kind of protective mechanism. It's a way that toxins don't get distributed to all the cells, but it creates a problem. When the blood does not flow effectively, when it doesn't circulate through the body effectively, the cells don't get oxygenated. the cells don't get nutriated, or they don't get oxygenated effectively, don't get nutriated effectively, and they accumulate toxicity. And this is why I say that while all disease is cell disease, all cell disease is preceded by dirty blood or hypercoagulable blood, blood that has a tendency to clot, blood that has a tendency to become viscous, blood that's just not circulating appropriately. The blood is the sacred space. And the Bible tells us the life of the flesh is in the blood, meaning the life force is carried through the blood. The life force is carried through the blood via nutrients, via oxygen, and via electricity. And of course, detoxification is also important so the toxins don't accumulate. That's why we say that you can have 55,000 different diseases, but they really are all about dirty blood, and they really only have one name, and that is MBFA, the inevitable systemic result of a toxic, malnourished, and hypoxic or low oxygen environment. My body is falling apart disease. And this is important to recognize because that's the only thing that goes wrong. Our bodies fall apart. It doesn't matter whether your bodies are falling apart at the level of the pancreas or the level of the liver or the level of the lungs or the level of the heart or any other level. What we want to do is we understand that the body is falling apart for fundamental reasons, no matter where that deterioration or degeneration is occurring. It's falling apart because the blood is becoming viscous and hypercoagulable from toxicity, either injected through the skin or enters in through what's called a leaky gut, which we'll talk about here in a second. At that point, the blood does not circulate effectively, and cells don't get nourished, the cells don't get oxygenated, and cells become toxic, and that leads to all disease states, no matter where those disease states show up. Next slide. And this is what it's all about. This is what I call the triangle of disease, which I noticed many years ago when people would come to me with health challenges. They would always have three fundamental points of breakdown. All chronic degenerative diseases, all of them are underlied by 3 points of bodily breakdown. Now, the first 2 points on the bottom are the most important. The third point is the jumping off point into all disease states. So let's talk about what I call the triangle of disease. The first point in the triangle of disease is breakdown at the level of the digestive tract. And unfortunately, this begins woefully early for most people. In fact, breakdown at the level of the digestive system can occur in utero, in the womb. And when we talk about the digestive system, we can boil the digestive system down to the intestine. The intestine is where the rubber meets the road. You eat a food, it goes into your mouth, it goes down your esophagus, goes into your stomach, and all kinds of processing take place. But in a way, the mouth and the digestive tract are not really part of the body in the sense that the food is segregated from the rest of the body. Then the food drops into the intestine from the stomach. It gets hit, before it gets into the intestine, it gets hit with a blast of bile, and that bile separates out the fatty material from the non-fatty material, the watery material. It also neutralizes the acid, which hopefully the food, which is at this point, by the way, is called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. It's not called food. And it should be acidic because you should have an acid stomach. That's a whole nother story because not everybody's producing enough stomach acid. Nonetheless, the chyme goes into the intestine. At the point of the intestine, you have the heart of the matter. No pun intended. The core of the body is the intestine. If you ever played basketball, I know you played basketball, AJ. What do they tell you to look at when your opponent is moving his head, doing head fakes and moving his hands and doing all kinds of tricks with the ball? They tell you to look at the center of the body, right? Look right at the intestine, because the intestine doesn't lie. The center of the body doesn't lie. In Chinese medicine, they call it the Hara center. That center is going to be the point where the outside world meets the inside world. The food in the intestine gets processed and enters into, under healthy conditions, enters into the circulatory system in a very controlled fashion. The vitamins, the minerals, the amino acids, the fatty acids, phytonutrients, glucose, and a few other substances go into the bloodstream through the intestine. And this process has to be very, very, very tightly regulated, obviously, because you can't have stuff getting into the bloodstream through the intestine willy-nilly in an uncontrolled fashion. You don't want stuff going into the blood. Remember, the blood is the sacred space. You can't have stuff just floating into the blood. So the body has evolved mechanisms for making sure that all the food molecules go into the blood in a very, very controlled fashion. However, this very, very controlled fashion depends on the integrity of the intestinal lining. And this is where the problem begins. Because you see, the integrity of the intestinal lining depends on a healthy intestine, healthy intestinal environment. The intestinal environment, the intestine, by the way, is like a tube or like a garden hose you could think of. And the inside of the intestine, the inside of the garden hose, the inside of the tube is called the lumen, L-U-M-E-N, the lumen. And the intestinal lumen has to be kept pristine. It has to be kept just so, just like the blood. Unfortunately, because of the way we eat, because of nutritional deficiencies, because of chlorine and fluoride in the water, because of drugs that we take, particularly antibiotics, changes occur in the intestinal environment, in the intestinal lumen, that ultimately lead to inflammation at the level of the intestinal lining. Now remember, the small intestine has got bacteria in it. It doesn't have a lot of bacteria, but it has some bacteria in it. And these bacteria are producing gases. If you eat the wrong food, which most of us are doing, what can end up happening is these bacteria, which are really the source of health and wellness, if you want to boil it all down to how health and wellness begins in the body, it's about the bacteria in the intestine, which we call the microbiome. And while we've known about the microbiome now for a couple hundred years, or probably about 130 or 140 years, we really haven't understood what's going on. In fact, we barely understand what's going on now until maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And that's why you see probiotic supplements everywhere. 20 or 30 years ago, you didn't see them everywhere. So these bacteria, which live in the small intestine somewhat, not a lot, at least they shouldn't be a lot in the small intestine, and in the large intestine, they're the key to everything. When a baby is born, a healthy baby is born, and there's a healthy birth, the baby goes through the mother's birth canal, and that baby is coated with bacteria. And those bacteria that coat the baby as the baby's passing through the birth canal enter into the baby's mouth and enter into the baby's nostrils and go through the baby's digestive tract and implant in the baby's intestine, among other places. There's bacteria throughout the body, but they're supposed to implant in the intestine. And this is where the microbiome begins. However, if a baby's born cesarean section, that's not going to happen. And immediately that baby's going to be compromised at birth. Once the bacteria implant, the proliferation of the bacteria depend on breast milk. In fact, the health of the intestine depends on breast milk in general. But we know that many babies are not breastfed. In fact, 30% of babies aren't breastfed, and many other babies aren't breastfed long enough, or even if they are breastfed long enough, or they're being breastfed, their moms are nutritionally incompetent themselves, so their breast milk is nutritionally incompetent, or the moms have allergies or immune activity, immune action on their own, and immune factors get into the blood. All of this can further compromise the health of the intestine. And now you have another mechanism for babies who are for digestive dysfunction among newborns, and the baby's not even can maybe be a week old or 2 weeks old, and he's already going to be compromised at the level of the intestine. These compromises will prevent the microbiome from functioning as it ordinarily should, and this will ultimately lead to inflammation at the level of the intestine. Now, two things will happen once the intestine becomes inflamed following disturbances at the level of the microbiome, whether those disturbances occur because of breast milk or whether those disturbances occur because of cesarean section, or whether those disturbances occurred in utero, in the mother's womb, because the mom wasn't taking care of herself and she was nutritionally deficient herself. So two things will happen at that point. Number one, because nutrients are absorbed through the intestine. Remember, this is a baby we're talking about here. Because nutrients are absorbed through the level of the intestine, or at the level of the intestine, inflammation is going to compromise nutrient absorption, and that baby is going to be functionally malnourished. Not going to be absorbing as effectively their B vitamins, their vitamin C, their minerals, their fats, and their amino acids. can see this could be a problem, but it gets even worse because you see, once the intestine becomes inflamed, toxicity can begin to enter into the bloodstream. This condition is called leaky gut. It's actually called leaky gut syndrome because it's a syndrome. Syndrome is many symptoms that are related to one cause. This leaky gut leads to many other symptoms because once toxicity enters into the bloodstream, all the cells are going to be compromised. This is the first point on the triangle of disease, and there is no chronic degenerative disease that does not involve some level of leaky gut or intestinal permeability syndrome, as it's technically known as. And we're finding out more and more about this every day from a research perspective, but just common sense will tell you that this could be a severe problem, and it is. Now, once the baby is malnourished, remember, we're talking a baby who's a week old, 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, a month old, a year old. We're talking about infants and little children, and they're already starting to manifest the signs of health challenges, even though the human body is meant to be very, very strong and very resilient until we get older. So sometimes things aren't as noticeable as they might be otherwise, but still, we've got a big problem with babies who have eczema, babies who have ear infections, babies who have other immune problems, babies who have acne and psoriasis and other skin problems. In fact, when I was compounding medication in my pharmacy, I would have to make baby heartburn medicine, baby Zantac, and baby Tagamet, literally for newborns. I'd have to actually compound it because there were no drugs for babies. We'd have to make special drinks, special Tagamet and Zantac drinks for babies. But it gets worse. This is just the first point on the triangle. See, because once the baby becomes malnourished, the baby doesn't get the kind of nutrients it needs. It starts to suffer from energy problems. And this is known, when a baby suffers from energy problems, this is known as colic. Also, the baby suffers from digestive problems, which is also part of colic. Colic comes from the word colon. So when a baby cries and a baby is uncomfortable and a baby is manifesting the signs of either nutrient deficiency or digestive discomfort, and it's low energy, what do we tend to give the baby? We tend to give the baby sugar. And this happens even if the baby is not uncomfortable, because baby food is very high in sugar. But we're conditioned, many of us are conditioned to give our babies popsicles and ice pops and applesauce and fruit juices, apple juice and pear juice and such. All of this is going to change the baby's blood sugar chemistry. So you got a colicky baby because he's got digestive discomfort, because he's got dysbiosis or disturbances of gut bacteria compounded by nutritional deficiencies, and probably some toxicity is entering into the bloodstream. So the baby's tired and grumpy and colicky. So what do? We give the baby a popsicle, or we give the baby some fruit juice, or we give the baby something sweet, and the baby's happy for a little bit until the blood sugar drops. And this is a very important mechanism to understand. The body needs to keep blood sugar very, very stable. Sugar is explosive. Sugar is very, very high energy. It's important, obviously. And when I say sugar, I mean glucose, and to a certain extent fructose, which is fruit sugar. It's very, very explosive. So the body has to keep the blood sugar stable. When a baby or anybody ingests fruit juice, pear juice, apple juice, or a popsicle or something sweet, the blood sugar spikes. It goes up. And this represents a dangerous situation because sugar is very explosive. We know sugar reacts with proteins, and there's proteins throughout the circulatory system. There's proteins literally inside the blood. And this is a big problem. So the body has evolved a mechanism for keeping the blood sugar stable, and that is the hormone insulin. Hormone insulin is designed to take sugar out of the blood and insert it into cells. So the baby's colicky, the baby's grumpy, the baby is uncomfortable, got digestive discomfort, all because of things that happen with the microbiome at birth through breast milk. Breast milk is deficient in microbiome building substances, or because the baby was born cesarean section and didn't get the microbiome bath, if you will. Or because of chlorine and fluoride in the water that the baby's drinking, etc. Baby's colicky and grumpy, and now the baby gets some sugar. Baby's happy for a little bit, until insulin comes to the rescue, pulls the sugar out of the blood. And now guess what? The baby's grumpy again. And the baby is colicky again. The baby is tired again. So what do? We give it more sugar. We give he or she more sugar. And again, the same thing happens. The blood sugar spikes. Insulin comes to the rescue, pulls the sugar out of the blood, shunts it into the cells. And once again, the baby is grumpy and colicky. We give the baby more sugar. Insulin comes to the rescue. I call this the high blood sugar, low blood sugar roller coaster. Technically speaking, this is what diabetes is all about, but it doesn't get diagnosed as diabetes immediately. It just ensues until you have a condition where the baby becomes a child, and now the child has diabetes, and childhood diabetes is becoming more and more significant. They used to call diabetes adult onset diabetes. They had to change the name because now kids are getting diabetes. Once the diabetic syndrome begins, the high blood sugar, low blood sugar roller coaster begins, the adrenal glands, your body's stress glands, kick in. The body's stress glands, the adrenal glands, are supposed to help stabilize biochemistry when the blood sugar spikes and the blood sugar drops. Both blood sugar spikes and blood sugar drops are emergencies to the body. And both will initiate or trigger the secretion of cortisol from the adrenal glands. Cortisol is the adrenal stress hormone. So to review, you've got a baby who's got disturbances at the level of the digestive system, beginning in utero for many babies, progressing past cesarean sections and deficient breast milk or incomplete breast milk or non-breastfed babies. That leads to disturbances in blood sugar, which lead to babies who are colicky and grumpy, and then being fed lots of sugar. And even in the best of circumstances, if they're not colicky and grumpy, most of the foods that we feed our babies are like we feed our adults, are very rich in sugar. This changes blood sugar chemistry. Eventually, the adrenal glands will kick in to kind of protect the baby from these disturbances in blood sugar chemistry. Cortisol comes to the rescue, and now you have a baby who's got disturbances in blood, disturbances at the level of the digestive system, disturbances at the level of the blood sugar system, and now secretion of cortisol. Over time, as cortisol levels rise in response to the high blood sugar, low blood sugar roller coaster, which itself is in response to intestinal problems, the thyroid will eventually slow down. That's not going to happen necessarily to little kids, but this could happen by the time an infant has grown to be a teenager or a young adult. When the thyroid slows down, you're dealing with a condition called hypothyroidism. So you've got dysfunction at the level of the digestive system, leading to dysfunction at the level of the blood sugar system, leading to problems with cortisol in the adrenal glands, leading to hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism, poorly functioning thyroid, then negatively affects the intestine because the thyroid is the control element for all the functions in the body. Every single function in the body depends on thyroid hormone, on a healthy thyroid or healthy thyroid functioning. If you're hypothyroid, nothing is going to work effectively. Under regulation of thyroid hormone, skin cells skin, heart cells heart, bone cells bone, liver cells liver. All cells do what they do under the regulation of thyroid hormone. Without effective thyroid hormone, none of the cells of the body will work effectively, especially, or at least for our conversation now, at the level of the intestine. Why is this important? Because now you're back in the triangle. Dysfunctions at the level of the digestive system lead to blood sugar issues, lead to adrenal issues, lead to hypothyroidism, which leads to further intestinal problems because the thyroid's regulating the intestine, which leads to further blood sugar problems, which leads to further adrenal problems, which leads to further thyroid issues, which leads to further intestinal problems, and on and on and on we go. This triangle of disease circulates, and things get worse and worse and worse. Simultaneous with this negative feedback or negative circle where everything is getting worse because the thyroid regulates everything else, every other bodily system is going to suffer. Now, as I said, this may not happen to a baby or to a child or even to a teenager, but this kind of condition degenerates over time. And so not only are you down in this vicious spiral of digestive problems leading to blood sugar problems, leading to adrenal thyroid problems, leading to more digestive problems, and on and on and on. But now every other system in the body is going to be operating at less than peak efficiency. Every system in the body. Dr. Broda Barnes wrote a book called Hypothyroidism, the Unsuspected Illness, back in the 1980s, where he articulated the relationship of every single health challenge to thyroid issues, which makes perfect sense because the thyroid is controlling everything. And this triad, or this triangle of disease, underlies everything. And why is this important? Because if you do not address the triangle, you can't address the heart disease, which is above the triangle. You cannot address the neurological problems, which are above the triangle. You cannot address the immune problems, the skin problems, the female health problems, or any other problems, any other of the 55,000 different problems in the body, unless you address the triangle. On the other hand, if you do address the triangle, everything else will take care of itself. Remember, we're talking about simplification here. We've now simplified 55,000 different diagnoses or different things that can go wrong in the body to 3. And if you really want to simplify it further, because the thyroid, the adrenal thyroid complex, which is the jumping off point to all diseases, is tertiary, it's 3rd, you can address everything by addressing the digestive system and the blood sugar system. And the only reason why we don't do this, even though this should make perfect sense to everybody, is because we have mental blocks and emotional blocks around food. And to compound that, we've created a food supply system in our country and around the world that takes advantage of our lack of understanding of how foods interact with the body. If we had a healthy culture, we couldn't have McDonald's. We couldn't have fast food. We couldn't have snack food. We couldn't have soda pop. We wouldn't have the kind of fried foods and processed foods, ultra processed foods that we have today, because it's impossible not to create disturbances in biochemistry via this triangle of disease with these kinds of foods that we're ingesting. The problem is we don't like to hear about food. We like what we like. And because of the link between foods and emotions, it's very difficult to get past this. Nonetheless, the power of working at these fundamental levels is so, so important. And it has such leverage. I work with people, for example, of neurological diseases. Neurological diseases like Parkinson's disease are incredibly easy to deal with because they're classic manifestations of this triangle. Likewise, skin diseases like acne and psoriasis, and pretty much anything. Heart disease, which kills more people than any other disease in this country. These are all eating issues. These are all food issues at the macroscopic level of the digestive system and at the nanoscopic or quantum level of the metabolic system. By the way, the second point in the triangle of disease, this blood sugar point is now known as, or the breakdown at the blood sugar point is now known as metabolic syndrome. When I came up with the triangle of disease, they didn't call it metabolic syndrome. They called it syndrome X. Now they call it metabolic syndrome, and pretty much every single health challenge you can name has some aspect of metabolic syndrome, thus validating the veracity of this triangle of disease. So if you're going to address health challenges, you've got to address them at the fundamental level, which is the triangle of disease. If you don't address them at the level of the triangle of disease, you are not going to be able to address diseases that supersede or that are on top of the triangle. And this accounts for the failure, in large part accounts for the failure of the modern medical model to treat chronic degenerative diseases. And there's no drugs that you can take that will correct this problem. All right, let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry. So this is how the whole thing begins. A healthy gut has cells that the whole body is lined with cells, including the intestine. And when we say gut, by the way, we're largely talking about the intestine. The intestine is lined with cells, and you can see that those cells are tightly pressed up against each other, so nothing can leak through the intestine into the bloodstream. But in the next slide, you can see that there are spaces between the cells that have now opened up. And you can also see the toxicity is entering into the bloodstream through these spaces. And on the left-hand side, they don't enter into the bloodstream because those cells are pressed up tightly against each other. They call these tight junctions. These tight junctions, in response to inflammation, which itself is a response to toxicity from food, as well as changes in the microbiome and nutritional deficiencies, now lead to the entrance of literal toxins from bacteria, particles of bacteria, immune molecules, histamine, as well as literal food particles into the bloodstream. Remember, we said the blood is a sacred space. It has specifications. It has to be kept just so. You know, when they're making computer chips in factories, they have to wear hazmat suits because if a little hair or a little particle of breath, something from your breath gets on a computer chip, or a piece of dust gets on a computer chip, it destroys the chip. The blood is the same way. It has to be kept pristine. Can you imagine the situation when you've got all these toxins that are entering into the bloodstream through the gut? It initiates a major inflammatory immune reaction in the blood. And this is where the whole notion of dirty blood comes from. And immediately you're off to the disease races. In fact, it's impossible not to be off to the disease races. And on top of that, the blood has a mechanism for cleaning itself out. The body is incredibly adept at something called homeostasis, which is pulling the ups down and the downs up, and cleaning everything out and reestablishing baseline. This homeostatic mechanism kicks in with the blood. And as the blood is circulating through the body, it has a mechanism for filtering. As the blood is circulating throughout the body, it's literally filtered by the connective tissue, the collagen and the fascia and the polysaccharides, the high hyaluronic acid. These act like blood filters to keep the blood clean. So as the blood is circulating around the body, it's being filtered via the connective tissue. Well, what does that mean? All of a sudden now you've got toxicity in the connective tissue. This is where autoimmunity begins. Some of that toxicity from the blood will also get dumped into the soft tissues, into the glands. Now the glands will look dysfunctional, and this is another mechanism of autoimmunity. If you go to the medical professionals, they'll tell you there's no known cause for autoimmune diseases, or they'll blame it on genetics. This is the cause of autoimmunity. The cause of autoimmunity is toxicity that enters into the blood, enters into the tissues, the connective tissue as a filter, or via dumping into the soft tissues from dirty blood, from blood toxicity. And in this way, it doesn't matter whether your autoimmune disease is affecting your nerves, or it's affecting your skin, or it's affecting your pancreas, or it's affecting any other organs of the body. That doesn't matter where the autoimmune attack is. It matters that there is an autoimmune mechanism in place that's beginning at the level of dirty blood, which once again shows you that if you clean the blood, you'll be able to reduce autoimmunity, in addition to other chronic degenerative diseases. You can see how critical the bloodstream is, the blood circulation is, and how important dirty blood is when it comes to the manifestation of diseases. All diseases, we've now reduced all diseases down to 3 major points and 1 major vector. The 3 major points are the digestive system, the metabolic system, or the blood sugar system, and the adrenal thyroid complex, and the vector is the blood. We've now simplified 55,000 different disease processes, and not only simplified it, but we made them manageable. And we didn't just make them manageable, we made them manageable by us. And indeed, there's nothing the medical model can do to correct a dirty blood problem. There's nothing the medical model can do to correct a dysbiosis or a microbiome problem at the level of the intestine. There's nothing the medical model can do to correct hypothyroidism. So we've not only taken control of our own health, but we've now eliminated the medical model as a presumed authority when it comes to addressing our health challenges. Next slide. So sugar has a very sticky quality. When I was a kid, one of the pranks that children used to play, I didn't do this, but one of the pranks kids used to play is they used to put sugar in people's gas tanks, and that would destroy people's gas tanks. Sugar is very, very, very sticky. If you ever got a pastry burn, you know that sugar burns hot. Caramel is really, really sticky stuff. Put sugar in heat and watch what happens. It goes from being a granular powder into a sticky mess. Heat plus sugar leads to a sticky mess that can react with proteins in a chemical reaction that's known as glycation. Glycation is measured by diabetics via something called the hemoglobin A1C test. The hemoglobin A1C test is a measurement of how much your hemoglobin, which is a protein, is candying, caramelizing, sugaring. So diabetes, by the way, is a leading cause of blindness, because the tiny little blood vessels in the eye are very susceptible to damage by glycation. It's a leading cause of amputations because the tiny little capillaries at the extremities, the hands and feet and the fingers and toes, are very susceptible to damage by glycation. Peripheral neuropathy is very common in diabetics because this glycation reaction can affect the nerves and the tissue around the nerves in the hands and the feet. Peripheral neuropathy is an agonizing health problem, health challenge, where your nerves feel like they're on fire. All of this is caused by elevated blood sugar, but it's even worse than that because, remember, insulin is coming to the rescue when the blood sugar levels are high. When blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up in order to compensate and pull the sugar out of the blood. The sugar drops, we get more sugar because we're now low blood sugar. Insulin comes to the rescue again, pulls all the sugar out of the blood. We go low blood sugar again, we eat more sugar, insulin comes to the rescue, and on this goes until eventually the cells don't listen to insulin anymore. This is called insulin resistance. The cells become resistant to insulin, the blood sugar builds up. Fortunately, the body will then secrete more insulin, and for a short period of time, that will compensate for the elevated blood sugar. But over time, even that elevated insulin will not help. This is known as metabolic syndrome. This is known as insulin resistance syndrome. Why is this important? Well, in addition to blood sugar being a problem, elevated insulin is a problem. Chronically high levels of insulin are associated with growth. Insulin is a growth substance. It makes cells divide very rapidly. When cells divide very rapidly, they can cause clogs in places like the blood vessels. This is one of the causes of hypertension. Sugar, by the way, can damage the blood vessels. When the blood vessels are damaged on the inside, they release chemicals which induce inflammation and protection, and this is also related to hypertension and high blood pressure. If you have toxicity that's entering into the bloodstream, resulting in hypercoagulation or clogged, dirty blood, that will also compromise the flow of the blood, and that will also lead to dysfunctions at the level of dysfunctions caused in the movement of the blood. All of these, the insulin and the sugar and the dirty blood from the digestive tract, these are all the causes of hypertension. The number one diagnosis, the most common diagnosis, medical diagnosis, is essential hypertension. The word essential means we don't know what causes it. Well, now you know what causes essential hypertension. Essential hypertension is caused by dirty blood. It's caused by damaged blood vessels, both of which are the end result of the triangle, the first 2 points on the triangle of disease. And if you want to really go all out, you can throw in the third point. Cortisol will also close the blood vessels, leading to hypertension, and a thyroid hormone will slow down the movement of blood. Essential hypertension is not essential. It's a triangle of disease issue. So sticky blood and insulin spikes both compromise blood flow via glycation, via insulin making cells divide rapidly, and also, this is, by the way, one of the major causes of cancer. The ultimate scourge, even though it's only the second leading cause of death in this country, it causes terror beyond belief, beyond words, when somebody's diagnosed with cancer, and this is how cancer progresses. It's impossible to find a case of cancer that doesn't involve some element of insulin resistance, as well as digestive health issues, as well as the third point on the triangle of disease. And by the way, the three leading causes of death in this country: heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, are all related to blood sugar and insulin, which itself is related to food, which tells you the leading causes of death in this country are all food issues. Next slide. Stress and metabolism crashes remove the body's brake on toxicity. Eventually, the body's not going to be able to distinguish between a stressor inside the bloodstream and a stressor on the outside. The stress response is generic. The stress response kicks in when, from an evolutionary standpoint, when we have a survival threat, like a lion or a tiger or a bear. Today, we don't have lions and tigers and bears, but we got credit card bills. We've got relationship problems and job issues and financial worries. All of these make the body think that there's a lion or a tiger or a bear at the doorstep, and all of these will initiate the stress response and stress response chemistry. Toxicity in the bloodstream will also initiate stress response chemistry. Stress response chemistry is manifested as activity at the level of the nervous system, the part of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. Our nervous system is designed to take the outside world and turn it into the inside. The nervous system is designed to take the outside world and convert it into biochemistry. Our biochemistry has to be responsive to what's happening in the outside world, but our biochemistry is inside our body, so it can't really tell what's on the outside world unless it has portals into the outside world, which it does. There's 5 main portals. There's probably more, but there's 5 main portals into the outside world that the inside world uses to assess what it needs to do. So the inside world needs to modify its biochemistry so it's responsive to what's happening in the outside world. It can't really perceive the outside world except through 5 portals. Those portals are your eyes, your nose, your ears, your mouth, and your skin. What do we call these 5 outside world portals? We call them the senses. The sense of hearing, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, the sense of touch, and the sense of taste, the 5 senses. There are probably more senses as well, but the 5 major senses are portals into the outside world that the body uses, the neurology uses, the neurological system uses. The neurological system is the main information processing system to decide what kind of biochemistry is going to happen. Now, you've got 2 nervous systems or 2 neurological systems. So the body will shunt information from the senses, the sights, the sounds, the tastes, the touches, and the smells. It will shunt them into one of 2 nervous systems. I'm being a little bit simplistic here because you have a voluntary nervous system and you have an involuntary nervous system. And really, we're talking about the involuntary nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, which controls all the organs of the body, is either going to control the parts of the body based on information that's coming in through the senses that indicate danger or information that indicate safety. So if, for example, to take vision as our portal, if our visual sense sees a lion or a tiger or a bear or some kind of threat, it will shunt that visual information into our emergency, survival, stress, danger nervous system, technically called the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is your danger nervous system or your survival nervous system. If the visual senses, if we're going to use vision as an example, if the visual senses see that all is right in the world, the information will be shunted into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your safety, your safety nervous system. So information will come in through the senses and it will go into the nervous system and get directed into the survival nervous system or the safety nervous system. Where do you think you want to spend most of your time? In the safety nervous system. And learning to activate the safety nervous system is a key to restoring yourself back to health, because all chronic degenerative disease is the end result of the manifestation of the danger survival nervous system. Under conditions of activation of the sympathetic or danger nervous system, if we perceive danger, whether it's real or whether it's imagined, by the way, because the biochemistry can't tell the difference between the imagination and what's real, and that's a very important message to take into account as we live our lives. Our biology doesn't know whether the threats are in our mind or threats are real. Very important point, because we can control our mind. In any case, if information is shunted into the danger nervous system, certain things will happen in order to help us get out of a jam. When you're trying to get out of a jam from an evolutionary standpoint, that jam is a survival threat. You're supposed to run. That's called fight or fight. That's called fight or flight. And the sympathetic nervous system is a fight or flight nervous system. Under conditions of fight or flight activation, your blood pressure will go up in order to get more pressure to the various tissues. Your eyes will open up wide. Your pupils will dilate so you can see. You'll have anxiety or jitteriness or nervousness. Your immune system will shut down. Think about it. When you're under stress, you don't need an immune system, so your immune system shuts down. You become more susceptible to infections. You become more susceptible to immune problems. Under conditions of sympathetic nervous system activation, your digestive system will shut down. When you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, a lion, or bear, you don't have to worry about digestion. You have a life-threatening issue. Under conditions of activation of the sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight nervous system, blood flow will be redirected from the front of your brain to the back of your brain. The front of your brain is where you make good decisions, the prefrontal cortex. The back of your brain is where you have fight or flight, the amygdala. So you'll make worse decisions. You'll make decisions out of fear when you're activating the sympathetic nervous system. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, you won't be able to conceive a baby. Conceiving a baby is the last thing the body wants to do when it's in a survival mode, and when it's in survival mode. On the other hand, take the visual portal as an example, when we sense safety, the blood will go from the back of your brain to the front of your brain. Will you make really good decisions? And will you be very creative? You'll have more fertility. Your digestive system will function more efficiently. And your immune system will become strong and robust. Your bones will heal more effectively. Your muscles will develop more effectively. You'll be able to sleep. Insomnia is a classic manifestation of an activated sympathetic nervous system. All health and wellness live in the parasympathetic mode. Now, this is not to say that the sympathetic nervous system is not very important, and it is. So it's a little simplistic, and I'm just trying to get a big point across, but you do need to have some sympathetic activity just to get your butt out of bed in the morning. The sympathetic nervous system is important. It's an overactive sympathetic nervous system is where we run into a problem. Anything you could do to access the parasympathetic nervous system is going to make you feel better. And all disease lives in the sympathetic mode. Dis-ease means out of ease. That's sympathetic. The fastest way, by the way, to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is to breathe. Breathing is the fastest way to tap into your neurology. Slow, deep, rhythmic breathing, SDR breathing. Also, giving your body enough nutritional resources can activate the sympathetic nervous system. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to have mega doses of micronutrients, which is what we talk about with our Beyond Tangy Tangerine and some of our other longevity products. Mega dosing gives the cells a sense that life is okay, that everything is good. And that's what we want to communicate to the body. Remember, dis-ease is out of ease. We want to tell the body life is good. You could be in ease, and drowning or saturating the system with micronutrients like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and fatty acids can be a very helpful way to tell the body that it's safe. Now, this is not true about macronutrients and calories, by the way. Macronutrients and calories are not necessarily your friend. You don't want to saturate the body with macronutrients, although you do want to saturate the tissues with micronutrients. Next slide. The only three things that can go wrong with the cell: starvation, suffocation, toxification. Remember, the cell is the livingness of the body. The body is made up of two major compartments or components: cells and stuff. Now, biology, we don't say stuff, we say tissues. So cells and tissues. There's four main tissues in the body. You have covering tissue, that's called epithelial tissue. You have electrical tissue, wiring, if you will, that's the nervous tissue. And then the core of the body is made up of muscle tissue and connective tissue. All that tissue comes out of cells. Our medical model treats disease at the level of the tissue and the organs, which come from the cells. But everything arises from the cells. In order to get healthy, you've got to have healthy cells. The reason we don't hear about it, as I said earlier, is because there's nothing the medical model has that can help cells. But that doesn't matter, because we can help cells. All disease is cell disease, and there's only three things that can go wrong with a cell: starvation, suffocation, and toxification. Starvation means cells aren't getting nutrients, so get yourself on the mighty 90 essential nutrients. Suffocation means cells aren't getting oxygenated, so make sure you're breathing correctly and make sure you're moving your body so the blood can deliver the oxygen. And thirdly, toxification or poison. Eliminate the poison and the toxification. Sometimes the poison comes in through injection, and that's a problem. But for the most part, the poison is coming into the bloodstream through a leaky gut. So patch up that leaky gut and make sure you're staying away from foods that inflame the leaky gut or disturb the microbiome. That first point of the triangle disease is sacred. That's where everything begins. Starvation, suffocation, and toxification are how it all manifests. And while the medical model doesn't have any tools for preventing starvation and suffocation and toxification, we can do it ourselves. Next. This is the circle that we were talking about earlier, a slightly different version of the circle. Toxicity enters into the bloodstream through a leaky gut. This leads to thickened, coagulated, hypercoagulable blood that tends to clot, i.e. dirty blood. The dirty blood will slow down perfusion or slow down circulation. That means tissues aren't going to get perfused or circulated. Tissues aren't going to get perfused as the circulation drops, I should say. That's going to lead to starvation, malnourishment, that is, because the blood cannot deliver nutrients to the cells. It'll lead to hypoxia, low levels of oxygen, so cells will become suffocated. Eventually, the brain will compensate for this condition by turning up the pressure. High blood pressure is in many ways a corrective mechanism. This corrective mechanism is designed to bypass the sticky blood to make sure that the tissues and the cells get oxygenated and get nourished. But as toxicity accumulates through a leaky gut, this whole circle continues despite the elevated blood pressure, and chronically elevated blood pressure creates its own health challenges. And that's indeed one of the reasons why we end up with cholesterol deposits in our blood vessels. Elevated high blood pressure eventually disturbs the lining of the vessels. This disturbance at the level of the lining of the vessels creates inflammation in the bloodstream as well as in the vessels themselves. This inflammatory trigger calls in calcium and plaques and cholesterol, and this is one of the reasons why, it's the main reason why, really, cholesterol deposits and blockages occur in the blood vessels. This is why you only get cholesterol deposits in blood vessels. You largely get cholesterol deposits and blood vessel blockages at the level of the arteries, not the veins, because the pressure is much higher in the arteries than it is in the veins. So this whole circle of toxicity entering into the bloodstream through a leaky gut, leading to dirty blood, leading to hypoxia or low levels of oxygen and malnourishment, and a compensation by elevation of blood pressure. All of this occurs in a circle, and it's underneath all chronic degenerative diseases via the vector of dirty blood, which itself is initiated by the triangle of disease. Next slide. So what do? The most important thing you could do is saturate your cells via the blood, via the digestive system, with the mighty 90 essential nutrients, the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and fatty acids that we say are essential, meaning you have to have them. Essential means your body can't make them, but you need them. You think air is essential. What happens if you don't have air? You die. What happens if you don't have any essential nutrients? You die. Now, most of us are not going to have zero essential nutrients, so it's not like death will ensue immediately, but we don't have enough of the essential nutrients, so while death doesn't ensue immediately, it occurs much more gradually. So the strategy here is to pound the body with essential nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the amino acids, and the fatty acids. This will help you rebuild the structure of the body, and structures relate to functions, so you'll end up improving the functions of the body. It will also alleviate cellular malnourishment, and eventually all cells will be participating or will be functioning much more efficiently. Next slide. So what are the mighty 90 essential nutrients? 60 minerals. They're bioelectrical. Minerals serve two major functions. One is in terms of structure, which is not quite as important because the structure of the body is largely dependent on a few minerals. But most importantly, minerals activate chemistry electrically. Under mineral deficiency conditions, chemistry is not activated. The vitamins are also activators. The amino acids are both building blocks and activators, and there are 2 to 3 essential fats that are responsible for hormone production, for various hormone production, as well as lubricity in the body. They're all important. Every one of these is important. There's none that you can do without. In terms of essential fats, sometimes you'll hear that omega-3 or omega-6 essential fats are not as important as omega-3. Not true. They're all important. You need them all. 60 minerals, 16 amino acids, 12 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, and 2 to 3 essential fats. A third fat, there's 2 essential fats. A third fat is said to be conditionally essential. Omega-6 linoleic acid, omega-3 alpha linolenic acid. Those are essential. You can't do without them. The third fatty acid is conditionally essential, and that is oleic acid, which is found in olives, by the way. Next slide. So stop the toxicity before nutritional deficiency, before nutritional saturation corrects the problems. You're not going to be able to out-supplement a constant stream of toxicity that enters into the bloodstream through a leaky gut. So you have to eliminate the toxicity. As long as you have toxicity entering into the body, whether it's flat out toxins from food, and there are literal toxins in food, whether it's toxicity that enters into the bloodstream through a leaky gut, or whether it's sugar, you're going to have a leak in your boat. And while you do nutritional supplementation to keep you from sinking, you're not going to get very far if you have a leak in your boat. So first and foremost, stop putting the toxicity into your mouth via foods, patch up a leaky gut, and treat yourself like a diabetic, even if you haven't been diagnosed as such. If you have any chronic illness, or if you just don't feel as good as you think you should be feeling, or if you have accelerated aging, or if your skin is not looking as good as it should, even if you don't have a flat out disease diagnosis, treat yourself like a diabetic just for longevity reasons. Every study that's ever been done on longevity shows that the less you eat, the longer you live. The less calories you put in your system, in your body, the longer you live, and the less sugar you eat, the longer you live. So eat less food, eat less sugar, keep your insulin stable, patch up that leaky gut. Treat yourself like a diabetic and stop putting the toxins into your system and patch up a leaky gut. Those are the first 2 points on the triangle of disease, and almost every single health challenge you can name will begin to improve. And keep in mind, once you approach the health of the system at these 2 levels, the digestive system and the blood sugar system, the third point on the triangle of disease will tend to take care of itself. Next slide. Deep belly breathing. There's many different ways to breathe, but the most important thing to breathe, the most important aspect of the breath, if you're sick or if you're not as healthy as you want to be, is to activate the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing. I call it SDR breathing, slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. Slow tells the body it's safe. What we're trying to do with breathing is we're trying to tell the body it's safe. When the body sees, or the brain actually reads that your breath is slow, it perceives that everything is okay. Because when you're running, your breath isn't slow. When you're in fight or flight mode, your breath isn't slow. Your breath tends to be slow when you're safe. So the brain reads slow breathing as safety, and you can turn on the parasympathetic safety response by slow breathing. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. In fact, deep breathing, or as they call it, diaphragmatic breathing, can be very important for propelling blood through the circulatory system if you're dealing with dirty blood. In fact, the diaphragm, which acts like a pump, can be thought of as like an assistant to your heart, because it improves pumping action, especially if you're dealing with dirty blood or if you're dealing with cardiovascular disease. A lot of people dealing with heart disease are dealing with low, what they call ejection fractions. Their heart is not delivering blood effectively or emitting blood effectively, and using the diaphragm or activating the diaphragm through deep breathing is a great way to do that. Activating the diaphragm also activates something called nitric oxide, which is important for blood circulation as well. And then R for rhythm keeps the parasympathetic nervous system happy, because the body loves rhythm. It hates chaos. Anything you could do to put the body or the brain back into a rhythmically oscillating electromagnetic state, into a calm rhythm, will calm the body. That's why you have the old hypnotist saying, you are getting sleepy, with a little watch. It goes left and right and left and right. So keeping the rhythm of the breath, keeping the breath rhythmically appropriate, is also important for activating the parasympathetic nervous system. SDR breathing, slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. And the parasympathetic nervous system is activated by the exhale, not the inhale. So exhalation is where you activate the parasympathetic nervous system to try to exhale longer than you inhale. So when you're doing your breathing, you inhale for 4 seconds, you exhale for 7 seconds. These are arbitrary. You can do any numbers you want. But for an example, you inhale for a short period, 4 seconds, you exhale for 7 seconds. And the best way to breathe is continuous breathing. That's the way babies breathe when they're sleeping. You don't take a gap between your breathing. It's called circular breathing. So you breathe in and you breathe out. Always best to breathe in through your nostrils, by the way, because that's where you activate the nitric oxide response. Which nitric oxide is a very fascinating molecule, which is associated with vasodilation and improved circulation. So inhale less than you exhale. By the way, if you want energy, you can do the opposite. You can inhale more than you exhale. That's called the breath of fire, where you inhale much more than you exhale. Try to do through your nose if you can. Always try to do through your nose. Next slide. Food journal is critical. I can't tell you the number of people I talk to about digestive health problems, and they'll be like, I don't have any digestive health problems. Don't believe it. If you got a chronic health disease, a chronic health challenge, any kind of diagnosis, you want to assume you have a dirty blood problem, i.e. a leaky gut problem, which means you have a digestive problem. Just assume it. The problem is they're hard to find, especially if you've been dealing with a digestive problem your whole life, because they become normalized. And I talk to a lot of people who will tell me that they have no problems with their digestion, but they've got all the symptoms of a digestive problem, including acne or fibromyalgia or menstrual issues or neurological issues, which are all classic signs of digestive health issues. And they'll say, no, I don't have any digestive health problem, not because they're lying or not because they're stupid, but just things become normalized. They don't know it. And that's why a food journal is so important. And it always helps to fast before you do a food journal. A food journal is where you just basically write down everything you eat and write down how you feel after you do your food journal. After you eat the food. So you do a food journal, you have a piece of paper with a column on the left, a column on the right. Column on the left is everything you eat, and I mean everything, and drink. And then on the right, how you feel an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours after you eat the food. And you'll be amazed by what you find out. People sometimes are shocked. Hey, every time I have oatmeal, I bloat. Every time I have corn, I break out. Every time I have wheat, my neurological symptoms get worse. Every time I have eggs, I get brain fog. The connections between the foods we eat and our bodily symptoms are hidden, but they become exposed by journaling, by doing a food journal or food diary. And this food journal or food diary can become much more valuable if you fast for a day or two before you do it, because symptoms will be more noticeable if you lay off of food for a couple of days. You don't absolutely have to, but it's just an easier way to assess what's going on in your body. If you do a food diary and you actually see the connections, you can make the connections for yourself. And it's always good to see the connections, the causes of your health challenge for yourself. And it's sometimes very, very shocking and very instructive. You want to think of this as biological forensics. That's what we're doing. We're looking for the scene of we're looking for the criminal, the perpetrator. So a symptom can be regarded as a crime. So say you have acne, say you have eczema or psoriasis, a skin disease. The skin disease is the sign of a crime. So what we want to do is we want to backtrack to find the source, the perpetrator of the crime. I call this biological forensics. It's like CSI with biology. The symptom, the rash, if it's on the skin or the high blood pressure or the cardiovascular issues, whatever the disease is, that's just the crime. That's not going to help you. Yeah, we have a crime. We need to find the perpetrator. And the perpetrator is always going to be hidden beneath the crime. And the way you get to it is by looking for clues. The clues are what we call symptoms. So you look for you look at your biological, the most dramatic symptom that you're dealing with, and then you collect symptoms, other symptoms. There's no one symptom. Nobody has just one symptom. You want to collect them. When you collect your symptoms, and that's why you always want to ask your patient, or you want to ask yourself, what else is going wrong? You can form an image of what's happening in the body. I always give the example of Bob Ross, who used to paint, and he used to show you how easy it was to create a landscape or create a mountain or create whatever he was painting. He would show you how easy it was to do. And he put one little splash of paint on the canvas and you couldn't tell what it was. The second splash of paint, you still couldn't tell what it was. And third splash of paint, all of a sudden you'd see a river. And then a fourth splash and you'd see a mountain. And then a fifth splash and you'd see some deer, etc. So the point is that you want to accumulate splashes. And the body, those splashes are going to be symptoms. You have your major symptom, and then you want to collect multiple symptoms. And by forming a picture, Like Bob Ross with the painting, you can find the perpetrator of the crime, working backwards via your symptoms. I call that triangulation because you want at least 3 symptoms. The more you have, the better it is. But you want to collect symptoms. Look for multiple symptoms. Nobody has just one symptom because all diseases manifest themselves as a syndrome, which means multiple problems associated with a single cause. Next. Be your own health authority. A good doctor should be teaching, not diagnosing and not prescribing, but telling us. We can be our own health authority. We can be our own doctors. Don't outsource your biochemistry. Modern treatments, what they call treatments, modern remedies or the pharmacomedical models, treatments of electrocution and surgeries and pharmacy and drugs, they're about hiding things. Think of an engine light in your car. If your check engine light goes off, you can put a piece of tape on it so you don't have to look at it. You put a piece of duct tape on there so you don't have to see your check engine light, but you're still going to have something wrong with your car and you're going to burn out your engine. So you want to fix the engine when your engine light goes off, not hide the signal. Healing requires one main factor. We've talked about all the things that go wrong when the body breaks down, but there's one major factor that's important for reversing the disease process and going back to healing, which is the body's birthright. And that is willingness. You have to want it. It's true about everything in life. Whatever you want to accomplish, you have to want it. You have to be willing. And even to precede willingness and wanting, you have to believe. You have to believe that it's possible. Our medical model tells us we're inevitably doomed. We believe at Longevity, we believe something different. We believe that all chronic health diseases, all chronic health challenges are reversible. But if you, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So if you do the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same result. You're not going to get different results. And if you think you are, you're insane. So you got to change the input if you want to change the output. And that's basically how you want to look at it. Our diseases are outputs. You want to change the output, you got to change the input. Next slide. So you have 55,000 different diseases. Call those the fruit. But there's one unifying condition, dirty blood, which itself comes from a leaky gut. That's the root. If you're working with the medical model, you're going to get your symptoms suppressed with chemistry or surgically excised through some kind of procedure. Your foods you eat, the input into your body is going to be completely ignored. On the other hand, if you're following our protocol, you're going to be saturating your body with nutrients, telling your cells that life is good. You're going to be stopping the toxic inflow through foods largely, but also sometimes through injections. And you're going to make sure you're practicing slow, deep, rhythmic breathing, as well as movement. Movement is another very important way that cells get oxygenated. The medical model looks at diseases as a curse. The body's inevitably flawed. Or you have just the luck of the draw, bad luck. Or it's in your genetics. Your mother had cancer, so you're going to have cancer. Anytime they ask you that nonsensical question about your family history with heart disease when you go in to have your heart checked, you know that they're following the medical protocol of believing that things are, that health challenges are the end result of heredity. We believe something different. We believe that what we call disease is really compensation. It's really a homeostatic mechanism that has gone awry or has been overloaded. It's basically the body trying to keep us alive. So high blood pressure becomes a compensatory mechanism. Acne becomes a compensatory mechanism. Heart disease or autoimmunity, those are the manifestations of the body compensating for either low levels of oxygen or perhaps toxicity that's in the blood. And if you go to the doctor, they see patients as passive recipients. The word patient, by the way, comes from the word passion, which means suffering. A patient is one who suffers. That's what the patient's role is to suffer. We believe that what we call patients can be empowered. They can be the architects of their own biology, and that's how we want to look at health and wellness. We can be our own health authorities. We can be the architects of our biology. In fact, we are the architects of our biology, whether we like it or not, for better or for worse. But once we accept responsibility for being the architects of our biology, we can do the most dramatic affect the most dramatic changes in the body, no matter what our health challenges are. Next slide. So your first step, number one, and I encourage you all, if you're dealing with a chronic degenerative disease, or if you're healthy and you don't want to be dealing with a chronic degenerative disease, choose nutritional saturation over symptom management. A, feed the cells, drown the cells, saturate the cells, make sure the cells have everything they need. You want your cells thinking life is good. It's kind of like when you have money in the bank. When you have money in the bank, you can buy a house, you can go on vacation, you can buy new clothes, you can buy gifts for your kids. You want your cells to feel the same way. You want your cells to feel that life is good. There's abundance. When you don't have a lot of money, you conserve, you slow down, you don't eat as much, you don't give gifts, you don't travel. You don't want your cells being in that mode. You want your cells feeling they've got everything they need to do their work. Stop the toxicity, mostly through the digestive tract, but also, unfortunately, in our world today, through injection. And 3, practice slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. Folks, this is so simple. We have made health so much more complex than it needs to be. Focus on these 3 points, and there's no chronic degenerative disease that will not begin to reverse itself. And if you're not dealing with a chronic degenerative disease, you'll add years to your functional life. Go to rootnotfruit.com for more information, triangleofdisease.com for more information, dailywithdocteam.com for more information. We want you on our team. If you like what you heard today, please reach out to us. We're looking for people that we can teach about nutrition. We're looking for people that we can teach about the longevity nutritional supplements. And we're looking for people who want to make some money helping other people. We're looking for service-oriented people who want to help their friends and neighbors and loved ones who are sick get better, or who aren't sick, stay healthy. Thank you very much. And we can take some questions if you like. Hey.
My man, Pharmacist Ben. Everybody, it's in here. Let's give my man a big, warm hand clap. Let him hear it, because that was fantastically, masterfully done. We appreciate you coming in. I like that last slide. Reclaim your independence. Today is Independence Day. What better way to do so than to reclaim your independence on your health independence?
Health independence. Yes, be health independent. I forgot. That's a great reminder on Independence Day. Let's be health independent. Be our own authorities.
We need to. We absolutely need to. Now, some of the questions that have come in are, and a lot of the comments. This should be shown in every classroom every single year. Like, kids are in school. It should be mandatory for adults too. That is your friend Wyoming Annie. And then Donald says masterclass on biology and chemical interactions, triangle disease, masterful understanding. Has anyone had issues with the high calcium and magnesium ratio in OsteoFX causing constipation?
That's unlikely that will cause constipation. Very unlikely. More likely causing, anything's possible, I suppose. Much more likely is constipation. It has to do with changes in the intestinal environment, dysbiosis and such. Also, dehydration can cause constipation. And then one of the most important causes of constipation is nutritional deficiencies, particularly in vitamin C and the B complex, especially vitamin B1. And I think we've talked about this before. There's actually a disease or a diagnosis called GI beriberi. Beriberi is Swahili for I can't. It's a neurological issue. We just don't feel like doing anything. And it's caused by thiamine deficiency, vitamin B1 deficiency. Well, that same vitamin B1 deficiency that causes I can't, or beriberi, or neurological problems where you don't feel like doing anything, can cause your intestines to not feel like doing anything. And this is one of the hidden causes of constipation. So nutritional deficiencies, especially in vitamin C and the B complex, as well as eating the wrong foods and changes in the microbiome, those are and lack of fiber, as well as dehydration. Those are the main causes of constipation. A high calcium magnesium ratio, theoretically, high calcium can cause constipation. Calcium causes contractions, and magnesium relaxes things. And many people are magnesium deficient, but I wouldn't blame it on a supplement that has a higher calcium to magnesium ratio.
No, I wouldn't. And Diladong, you can always email us at questions@dailywithdoc.com if you have any questions. I'm not actually looking at Smile, but I'm sure that website may not even be listed there, but there is a phone number there, and our team can take your call. Becca, what is that phone number that's on the screen there? Because you're muted, by the way.
That phone number is 855-835-2777.
That's
Again,
right.
855-835-2777.
That's right. And just to let you know, Pharmacist Ben, we there is one question we will ask.
Yeah.
Would toxic blood also impact problems such as low blood pressure
Absolutely.
and low iron?
Well, think about it. Absolutely. First of all, low iron usually involves the liver. The liver is the major control point for iron in the blood. It could also be nutritionally. You can also be nutritionally deficient in iron, so that's another thing that can happen. But most importantly, the low blood pressure issue. Think about it. If the blood is sticky and coagulated and cloggy and viscous, it's not going to move as well. That means the pressure is going to drop. The pressure is a measurement of the movement, the speed of the blood. So yes, low blood pressure can be caused by toxic blood. In fact, that's our main point. I mean, we had a lot of points we talked about today, but the main point is everything is toxic blood. So you should just assume that if you got a health challenge, you got dirty, sticky, sludgy, toxic blood. And by the way, one of the best ways to clean the blood out, to detoxify the blood, is plant-derived minerals. Plant-derived minerals support blood detoxification, and that will also support hydration of the blood. Plant-derived minerals have a hygroscopic effect, and they'll improve blood fluidity. So plant-derived minerals are one of the best things you could do to improve the fluidity of the blood, improve the movement of the blood if you're dealing with a toxic blood issue. Yes?
But what came first, the chicken or the egg? If you got low iron, they're not digesting. They're probably not absorbing.
Well, it could be lack of absorption. It could also be a liver problem. It could also have to do with chemistry in the liver that's keeping iron from being released from the iron stored in the liver, and how its release is affected by the health of the liver. So it could be a liver issue as well. And we know metabolic syndrome is a problem. And which came first, the chicken or the egg? I would say all health problems begin because of this whole the historical nature of the triangle of disease, how it begins at birth. I would say it all begins with it all begins with issues at the level of the digestive system, the first point on the triangle of disease. Remember, the liver is a digestive organ.
When you have a nickname now, you're now P Ben.
Okay.
When P Ben says flood the system with nutrients, does he also say we may need more nutrients than the standard amounts, i.e., more EFAs for high inflammatory conditions?
You don't want to look at EFAs for inflammatory conditions. And that's really important. You don't want to look at this for that. I got this problem, or I got that problem, I take this nutrient. So it's not quite like that. EFAs, essential fats, control the inflammatory process. That's true. But you don't want to look at, I have inflammation, so I take EFAs. You want the whole spectrum, all 90 essential nutrients. You need them all. But the point is interesting about flooding, and the way the question is phrased, it's flooding versus the standard amounts. So when he says standard amounts, I'm assuming they mean the RDAs. And this is an important point that we didn't talk about. The recommended daily allowance, or the RDAs, are not there to keep us healthy. They're there to keep us from being sick. You see the distinction? The medical model thinks being healthy is not being sick. That's not true. Not being sick is just the bare minimum. Being healthy requires much more than the not being sick levels of nutrients that the RDAs represent. And when I say being sick, I'm literally talking about scurvy and beriberi and pellagra and these disease states. The RDAs are set up so that you don't get scurvy, but you need much more vitamin C than just the bare minimum to keep you from having scurvy or whatever the deficiency disease that they're trying to correct. So the medical model is interested in having us not be diseased, but that's not the same as being healthy. Being healthy is a quantum level different, a quantum leap different than not being sick. Sure, you don't want to be sick, but that's not enough. You want to be healthy. You want to be strong. You want to be vital. You want to be resistant to diseases. You want to be resilient. You want to be growing. You want to be building. You want to be maximizing your quality of life, not just not having scurvy or not having pellagra. And that's why I always talk about mega dosing, and Doc always talked about mega dosing with micronutrients, with some exceptions. Some of the minerals you got to be a little bit careful of. For the most part, the micronutrients, the vitamins, the amino acids, and the fatty acids, you want way higher doses than the RDA.
Well, Pharmacist Ben, speaking of not getting sick, I'm going to let you go on this Independence Day so you can slow chew some hot dogs.
Yes, 150 million hot dogs will be eaten today on the 4th of July. Thus, the validation of our triangle of disease.
Yeah, absolutely. And
there's no, among the worst foods you could possibly eat are preserved meats, and hot dogs being classic examples.
Yes, no matter what some team member of ours tries to tell us that they're clean versions, but at any rate, thank you very much. And
thank you.
Men are on the screen, and we are standing on the shoulders of some fantastic ladies who are doing the work. Ruth Ellen, Becca Dukes, Mary, Keeley, thank you for taking your Saturday out and doing this for us. And Pharmacist Ben, thank you again for teaching the folks and really putting this together. Any parting words?
Yes, thank you, AJ, for putting everything together. You're doing amazing work. Yes, parting words. We're not sick. We're starving. We don't need to be fixed. We need to be fed. There's not a single chronic degenerative disease that cannot be reversed if you work at the fundamental levels, the triangle of disease and the vector, which is dirty blood. Everything can be reversed, and we can help you do that. Reach out to your longevity rep, or reach out to a longevity distributor, and be a distributor. We're looking for people that we can train and we can teach, people who want to make the world a better place via health and nutrition. And that's my parting words. Thank you very much.